Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about 7 Seconds. 7 Seconds is a limited series on Netflix. It has 10 episodes and it's about a young boy who was killed, and the people who killed him are trying to cover it up. It's a very it's a very brief description of what it's about. This video, I'm going to be talking about spoilers, everything that happens, and my thoughts on what this series represents and how it's related to society right now. So if you haven't seen it yet, I'm warning you, I'm going to talk about spoilers. So 7 Seconds. So a lot happens in this. So at the very beginning, we see a man driving, and he's in like this SUV type of car. It's snowing. It's really bad conditions for driving. There's a blizzard coming. He's driving and he's on the phone, and he reaches down to put his phone down in his car, and then you hear like a bump and the car moves, and he's like, oh, I just hit something. And he stops his car and he gets out and he sees that there's a bike up under his car, meaning that he hit a person. And then it cuts and 3 men show up, and you realize that those 3 men are police, and so is the man who hit the person on the bike. One of the police officers, who is D'Angelo, he goes and he looks around and he sees the snow is stained with blood over at this bank. And he goes over and he stands on top of the bank and he looks down into this ditch, and we don't see anything. But he goes back to the car and he tells the man who hit the person, he tells the kid, he tells the man driving, whose name is Peter, I believe. He tells him, you need to drive away. Just drive away. They're going to blame you for this. They're going to tear you apart. They're going to crucify you. Just drive away. We'll take care of everything else. So that's what he does. He drives away. And D'Angelo and the other 2 men, they cover it up. It's not until later on that you realize that the person that they hit is a young boy, a 15-year-old male black teenager. You meet his parents. His mom is a teacher. His dad has some type of like a blue collar type of job. And they go home and they realize that their son isn't there. They check the voicemail and it's the hospital. They go to the hospital. They find their son. They have no idea what happened to him, but they never show you his body, interestingly enough. I was watching it and I wanted them to show his body, but they never did. They would show pieces of it. They showed like how his skin was messed up, like on his legs and his arms, but they would never show his face and the extent of the damage. You would just see little pieces like, oh, his leg is broken. Oh, his skin is messed up there. But they would never just show him. It's not until the end of episode 2 that Brenton, the young man who was killed, not a young man, the teenager who was killed, it's not until then that he actually dies. In episode 1 and the first part of episode 2, he's in a coma. But they learn that he just laid in that ditch for 12 hours. After those policemen left him there, it was sometime in the morning, like 6 or 7 in the morning. And he laid there in the snow during a blizzard in New Jersey and just laid out there with the elements for 12 hours until someone found him. Until someone who found him who was a decent person and felt like, oh, I should call the police. Until a decent person found him, it took 12 hours for him to get out of the snow. So the entire series is about these 4 men, the police officers, trying to cover up what they've done. And it's about a detective and a prosecutor trying to figure out what actually happened to Brenton. So spoilers. Eventually, those 4 police officers, people do find out that it was them. So the maybe like 75% of the show is about them covering it up. And then the last 25% is about the trial that happens once people realize that those 4 officers were involved in his death. This whole show, like everyone in this show is a horrible person. Like just there's no innocent people in this entire story. Like, no one was innocent. No one was a good person. Maybe they started out as good people, but by the end of it, everyone is just messed up. The only person who was a good person was Brenton, and he was left in a ditch for 12 hours. So let's talk about the police officers. I don't remember all their names, so I got to look it up. Okay, so the man who was driving the cars, Peter Jalomsky. So he's new to the team. He moved from somewhere else, and he's new to this team. The team usually handles narcotics, but he's new to this team, and he's trying to prove himself. And the leader of the team, D'Angelo is the one who said, like, you just need to leave. And he's the one who's been pushing for the other police officers, Osorio and oh crap, who's the other guy? You know what I'm talking about. He was a chunkier with the greased back hair. But the other two were like, we didn't do anything. We didn't hit anybody. Why are we covering this up? But D'Angelo is just, he insists on covering up for some reason. And as you go on, you see and you learn different things about D'Angelo. You learn that D'Angelo and his wife, they're unable to have kids. And Peter was on his way to the hospital because his wife is pregnant. And I think that because Peter is about to be a father, that's why D'Angelo is trying to protect him so much, because he really wants to be a father. So that's why he's protecting Jalomsky, Peter, for some reason. But even then it's a stretch because they're not related. He's not related to him. There's no reason for him to be doing all of this other than the fact that he's a fellow white police officer. So D'Angelo, they handle narcotics. They're crooked cops. They handle narcotics, but they also are drug dealers themselves, and they profit off of the drugs in the community. So that's what D'Angelo, the man who's Puerto Rican, Osorio, and the other guy whose name I can't find, they're crooked cops. Peter is actually a good guy. He tries to be a good guy. He tries to do everything by the books. And he initially leaves because he's scared. He doesn't know what to do. He's not really thinking. D'Angelo just told him to leave, so he left. And when he got home later on, he was looking at the front of his car and looking like, what did I do? And he went and threw up in his bushes, and his neighbor saw him. So he's very remorseful about what he did, but not remorseful enough to come forward and say, hey, I did this. And every time he tries to, D'Angelo tells him, no, you're a good guy. That's just some kid. He's probably doing drugs. He's probably a drug dealer, probably part of some gang. Who cares about him? They're going to ruin your life. So don't do it. You're about to be a father. Your kid needs you. Just forget about it. So that's what D'Angelo tells him. So that's what these 4 police officers are like. And at the beginning, as I said, Peter's very remorseful about what he did. But by the end of it, he starts to agree with D'Angelo. And he's like, I made a mistake and I'll have to deal with that for the rest of my life. But I'm not going to prison for this kid who was probably a bad kid to begin with. So then there's the detective Fish and the prosecutor KJ. Fish initially struck me as a bad person too, because Fish just assumed that Brenton was a part of some gang. The bike that Brenton was riding is associated with a local gang called the Five Kings. And because he was on that bike, Fish just assumed like, oh, he's probably in a gang. And he basically said that to the parents, which is really offensive, and didn't care about it because he's like, he probably is. And KJ, who is a black woman, she's the prosecutor. And she's the only one who's really trying to figure out what happened. The police officers initially found a homeless man to blame it on. But KJ started piecing things together like, no, that doesn't make sense. And, well, what car did he use? And all these type of things. And actually ask questions instead of just assuming, oh, well, that's what happened just because the police said that. Once she starts questioning things, she sees that doesn't make sense. That does not add up. So I'm going to do some real investigating. And she finds, she keeps working to find out what happened. KJ is a really messed up person. Even though she is trying to do this one thing right, she's not a good person. She's an alcoholic. I can't even say that she's a functioning alcoholic. Because she's not. She misses cases or court appearances, and she messes up everything. At one point, KJ and Fish are talking, and KJ like breaks down and says like why she's such a screw up, and it has to do something with a former case. And she blames herself for how that happens. And ever since then, she's just been like messed up mentally. And Fish is like, so is this the point where I'm supposed to care? Like, you're still a bad person. You're just making that an excuse to act as a bad person. And like leaves her to cry in her car alone. And he's kind of right. She is like just using that as a crutch to keep being a bad person to other people. And she makes a lot of mistakes as a prosecutor, and later on in the trial, those mistakes come back to bite her, and they hurt the defense, or not the defense, they hurt her case in the trial. Fish makes mistakes. Something that he did hurts their trial. Later on, I start to like Fish more and more, and he puts down these assumptions about people, and by the end of it, I do like Fish, but he's still got his issues. Peter's wife initially doesn't know anything that's going on, but soon she learns what Peter did, and she was like, I don't care about Brenton's mother. I have my child, and I want to protect my child, and we're going to do whatever it takes so that you don't go to jail. I don't care about her, and I don't care about her son. Marie, Peter's wife, she's a messed up person. As for Brenton's parents themselves, they are very devout Christians, and it's very blatant through the first part of the series. But as we go on, and really after Brenton dies, Brenton's mother, who's played by Regina King, her name's Latrice, she just really just loses all of her faith, and she's like, I don't, like, what God would do this to my baby? Like, what God would allow this to happen? And she just completely loses her faith, which puts a big rift in between the marriage between her and Isaiah, Brenton's dad, because he's still very strong in his faith, and he's trying to convince his wife to still stay strong, but he's unsuccessful to the point where she moves out the house and lives in her car for weeks because she just can't be in the house with him. Latrice at one point wants to kill Peter because she eventually learns that Peter was the one that ran over Brenton, and there's nothing she can really do about it. So she tries to get a gun and she tries to kill Peter. She's not successful. So that's one bad thing about Latrice, but she's under a lot of stress. But she was gonna try and do it. Until Isaiah's brother told her, if you're going to shoot that man, try and shoot that dog first. And she couldn't do it. So she couldn't bring herself to actually take someone's life. But she has a whole lot of issues, obviously, which is understandable. Isaiah, there was one point where Isaiah was talking to Brenton's friend, Caduce. But there's something that Caduce shares to Isaiah, and Isaiah just flips out and treats him horribly. And as Caduce was explaining what was happening, I was like, Isaiah, please be a good person. Please be a good person. Please be supportive about this. But no, he wasn't. And he treated Caduce horribly. But again, he's acting out. So they're okay people. They're just going through a really rough time. Everyone else is just like, they're horrible people. The thing that's bothering Isaiah the most is that he realizes that he never really knew his son, because Isaiah was working extremely hard to be able to save up so that his family could leave kind of the projects and buy a house somewhere. And he worked so hard to provide a better life that he never really had time to form a relationship with his son. There's a character, Nadine. She didn't witness the murder, but she heard it. They were in like this trail in a park, and behind the park was like this abandoned building, and Nadine is some preppy white girl who's on drugs and just likes to leave home sometimes and sleeps in abandoned buildings, and she was sleeping there, and she heard Brenton getting hit, and she heard the men come, and she looked out at them, So she knew something had happened, but she didn't do anything. There were so many people that could have helped him and didn't. He literally sat there for 12 hours and bled out, and nobody did anything. The police just go through so much lengths to cover it up. And, you know, they get rid of Peter's car. They blame it on the homeless man. Once they find out about Nadine, the two guys, the Puerto Rican man and the other guy whose name I cannot remember. But those two, they're like, D'Angelo, like, what's going on? Like, you need to handle this with Nadine. So D'Angelo tracks down Nadine's friend, tries to trick Nadine to come outside by texting Nadine using her friend's phone. But Nadine sees him outside, waiting for her, so she runs off. I really thought Nadine was dead. Like, I really thought she was about to die then. So, he tried to kill her, and then later on, they all of them kidnap her. Not Peter, but D'Angelo and the two other police officers. And they kidnap her, throw her in the trunk, go to like this grassland area. I don't know where they were at. Where no one was around, and they took her out of the trunk, and she's like pleading for her life, like, I won't tell anybody, I really won't, and all this stuff. And D'Angelo like gets down on the ground like he's about to like choke her or something, but he freezes. And it's one of two moments that D'Angelo shows that he may be some type of a decent person, because he couldn't bring himself to kill Nadine. But one of the other police officers, he did not want to go to jail. So he chased down Nadine, and you can hear her screaming in the background. And then all of a sudden her screams stop. So he did kill Nadine. So they're willing to kill other people now just so that no one finds out that Peter killed Brenton. And they're just going to all these extreme lengths. And during the trial, it shows that they made the mistake because the police officer whose name I can't remember, he was saying, like, I'm the only one. I never killed anybody. D'Angelo, he killed somebody. Peter killed somebody. Osorio, I think that's how you say his name. He killed somebody. But that one guy is the only one who didn't kill anybody. And he kept the grill of Peter's car as evidence to prove that it happened, basically, because even then, I'm not quite sure how that would clear him. When the police find the evidence of the grill, you're thinking like, oh, like we're really going to get him now. And they don't. KJ gives Peter a deal and says, if you confess and explain about the other three police officers' involvement, we'll give you a lighter sentence. And when it's time for Peter to go on the stand, he doesn't do that. He chooses to protect those three police officers and say that it was all him. And he says that he killed Brenton. He didn't mean to. It was an accident. He never saw him. But KJ proves that you would have to be on the bank looking down into the ditch in order to see the Statue of Liberty. And you couldn't just see it from his car, which proved that he got out of his car at some point and looked down into the ditch and would have seen Brenton's body and would have seen that he was a black child laying there bleeding out and didn't do anything about it. So even after KJ proves it, they still get away. The other three police officers, nothing happens to them. They're on paid leave. Ooh, boo-hoo for them. And Peter is sentenced to 364 days. Not even 365. Not even a full year. 364 days in prison. So, almost a year of his life. Brenton was 15 years old, and his life is over. At one point, KJ is explaining to Brenton's parents that because Peter is a police officer, he has certain rights, and they can't give him as severe of a sentence. And it blows my mind that because someone has a badge, because someone has a certain profession, that the law can be bent for them. You know, it's just this assumption that police officers can't be bad. They're human. Police officers are human just like anyone else, any other profession. To say that police officers can't commit these crimes, or like, oh, how dare you accuse a police officer of doing this? There's bad doctors, malpractice, that's a real thing. There's bad doctors, there's bad teachers, there's bad lawyers, there's bad politicians. There's no occupation is exempt. Just because you're a certain title doesn't mean that you are a good person. And it just shows how our society is and our culture. And it's really frustrating. Watching this was really frustrating. Just comment down below how you felt about it, if it stressed you out, if it was hard to watch this, but you had to keep watching just for the hope that it would end the way that you wanted it to. And how did you feel once they said the verdict? And how did you think of the relationship with the butlers, the parents? What did you think about that? Or do you think that Peter really is a bad person? Because he started out being a good person, but then he just kind of let himself be controlled by D'Angelo and convinced himself that he didn't need to tell the truth and all of this. So I'd love to start a conversation about what you thought about all of these characters. Marie, Peter's wife, she was a horrible person. Just let me know what you thought about the characters and this series in general. I'd love to hear your thoughts. So I hope you like the video and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next time. Bye.